When you search things on Google, the first thing that shows is the Gemini summary. How does this affect the SEO?
These Gemini overviews, it is totally dependent on.
Hi freelancer, welcome back to today's episode of the Freelance Blueprint. I'm your host Lizzie, a freelance UX designer and digital nomad. Today we're joined by Owain. Owain is an SEO consultant and he has different niches like technical SEO, e-commerce SEO, and also SEO for China. The average freelancer who has a website where they have their portfolio services, what do you recommend for them to do to rank higher on Google?
Niche-based pain points in terms of work that you've delivered or problems you've solved.
Where do you find your leads or your clients?
I mostly get my clients through.
In this episode, we cover several topics, and one of them being how AI changed the landscape of SEO, the dilemma of knowing when is the right time to scale your business or if you should scale your business, and the constant lingering anxiety of like, how long is this gonna last? So let's get started. Thanks, Owain, for taking the time today.
Very good. I'm very happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Where are you calling from?
So I'm calling from a town in the very southeast part of the UK called Margate, which is in Kent. So if you look at a map of the UK, it's right on the eastern coast, probably the most furthest easterly point of the UK. We're probably closer to France, Belgium than we are to other parts of the country. And you'll be very pleased to know that it's absolutely hammering it down with rain this morning. We've had a really good start to the spring in the UK, but no, it's been back to classic British weather at the moment, just raining all morning. So yeah, I'm happy to be inside today.
The lighting looks good though.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, sending a false pretense. Yeah.
If I wouldn't know anything about you, but I would meet your best friend, how would they describe you to me?
Oh, wow. Okay. I mean, it really depends on the friend and on the context. I'm trying to just rattle through a sort of Rolodex of people that how will they describe me? I would say, yeah, I mean, I guess kind of like reliable, I guess. I'm often called structured, and that's often in the work environment, which is like really boring. I know it's that's often the feedback I get is like, you're so structured, it's like kind of organizing and things like that and putting blockers in calendars, things like that. But outside of the boring stuff, I guess, I'm quite creative in my free time. So you can probably just about see a sort of a quite like shaded guitar in the background there. So I've got like kind of outside of my day job, my freelance life of being an SEO consultant, digital consultant. I make music, I write, I like to go running and things like that. So yeah, I guess the reliable creative person would be, and those two things often don't kind of, bash heads together, but I like to think that there's something going on there, I think.
I think that's the perfect combination for a freelancer actually, because you need to be structured. You don't have a boss who comes to you and tells you what to do. You have to create your own to-do list and you have to motivate yourself to do that. And you need some form of creativity because it's not just like when you freelance, you don't just do the task. You also have to like promote yourself and these kind of things. What was it for you that got you into SEO in the first place?
So I'm going to have to use a very tired trope that I'm sure you've probably heard so many times, that people who get into SEO, I literally just fell into it, and that's as far as I can tell, unless you are kind of born with this desire to do SEO from a very young age. I don't think I've met anyone that's ever wanted to do that, but it is an enjoyable and fruitful profession. But no, I literally just fell into it. So my backstory is a little bit interesting, I'd say. So I used to live in China a long time ago. This was in my kind of early to mid 20s. I kind of graduated with a degree in English literature. So that's kind of where I guess the creative side comes from. I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to be like a kind of, I don't know, like a fiction writer or a journalist, whatever it happens to be. That's kind of my core passion. I still keep it up. I still try and do that where I can in my job. But yeah, I graduated with a literature degree. This was back in 2008. So that was a fun time when we had another existential world crisis going on, one of many. And there wasn't a lot going on in the UK at the time. So I kind of took the jump to move out to China at the time and initially did a kind of stint teaching English as a foreign language, which many people end up doing if they go to Asia. They kind of do like a little course to kind of qualify them to teach, inverted commas, qualify them to teach English. And I ended up spending 5 years out there in total, just under 5 years. 1 year in the South, 4 years in Beijing off the back of that, and wanted to kind of get out of the teaching thing and ended up kind of getting into, well, editing, writing. I picked up the language quite well as well. I still retain a decent fluency in Mandarin, and ended up being a part of an editorial team of an expat magazine, an online expat
Hmm.
magazine, that's still
So
going, I believe.
when you say editing, you don't mean like editing film and stuff. You mean like editing like words.
Yeah, that's right. So new like
Hmm.
magazine editor, basically. Yeah.
Okay.
So it was I was doing bits like odd jobs, translation bits, freelance writing for a number of publications on events that were happening in Beijing, whether it was like kind of fashion events or product launches for various Western brands. I was kind of sent around these different places around town. And I landed a job being part of an editorial team for this online magazine, which we would translate articles from Chinese media and also write kind of original articles for expats or,
Hmm.
overseas people that were living in Beijing. And that's where I kind of first interfaced with SEO. We had a developer on the team who was kind of, submitting the articles in the back end, doing, building the website. I have no idea what CMS it was built on because it's pretty horrible looking, but who knows? But that was the first time I kind of got into the concept of SEO. Basically, he would often talk about things called like SEO titles, descriptions, keywords, and things like that. And then off the back of that, I moved back to the UK, and I kind of started again. I had to move back to my hometown, which is kind of just south of London in the southeast of the UK, not far from where I am now. And I sort of tried to market myself as this, I don't know, like raconteur man who traveled around the world and knew Chinese and all this kind of stuff, but had digital marketing and writing skills. And I put like an ad out, I think, on either on Indeed or Gumtree, some job site, something like that, just marketing myself as a person with that skill set. And I got picked up by this London agency who were looking for someone to work on a project for them that needed a Chinese language skill. It was an SEO project. It was a one-off audit for a quite a big client at the time. I think they were in kind of like automobile industry, and they wanted like just a kind of research project as to what the SEO landscape was for them in China, which required keyword research, required kind of looking around on Baidu, which perhaps I'll get to shortly, the kind of search engine over there. And that was kind of my first proper SEO job. It was initially just supposed to be a short-term contract, but then I got into they kept me on, and then they kind of threw me at other projects, whether it was
Mm.
technical content, and then it just kind of continued through there really. And then we're talking sort of 13 years ago now. So that was my
Wow.
entry. Yeah.
Wow. Ah, that's interesting because I think sometimes it's like jobs like this that are very online. It gives you a lot of flexibility to work from anywhere on very different topics. And I also fell into UX design. I didn't even know what it was, and I worked at the startup and did UX design and kind of fell into it. So I know what that's like when you kind of like it's not like you chose a role, but it feels like the role chose you.
Yeah.
And you seem to have all the kind of skill sets that just fit with it. And I don't know if you ever have this feeling like, oh, if I wouldn't have gone to China or if I wouldn't have done this, maybe I would be XYZ instead. I think especially younger generations now, they feel like you have to make your passion your income. You have to have a life where you don't do anything that's kind of boring or like just a job. Everything has to be your passion. But I
Hmm.
often think when things like this happen, like I wouldn't be able to travel or like work remote and all these kind of like maybe, but not to the extent if I wouldn't have fallen into UX. Like, how do you feel about the job choosing you compared to you choosing the job? Would you do anything differently?
I mean, there's a number of things that I often have in the kind of back burner of backup careers that I wish perhaps one day in a parallel universe I could have done, but the writing thing is always there. Like it's something that I keep up on the side, and who knows, one day I might have something going on with that. But no, I think it's a very, you kind of summarized it quite nicely there. It is very much I guess a vocation that has chosen me because it does envelop a lot of things that I picked up along the years of traveling and the studies I did at university. Insofar it's a lot of communication, it's a lot of kind of there is a need for strong writing communication skills, also a bit of creative thinking, problem solving. There's obviously you've got the kind of tech element to it, you've got the content element to it, the strategic element to it. as well. And the bit which I find myself doing a lot more these days, which is, and we can perhaps talk about this other career that I may have had in another life, which is the kind of political side to it. There's a lot of, particularly if you work on the kind of like big client, enterprise type clients, which is what I do a lot these days. There's a lot of kind of management of stakeholders and trying to kind of get a sense of what interests them, what their KPIs are, and how that kind of feeds back into what you're trying to do to kind of prove success and achieve what you want to do from an SEO standpoint for that brand. So there's a lot of that, which I find quite interesting. It's all about people, it's all about what makes people tick, what's their backgrounds, what are they trying to do in their position in the company. And yeah, that I find really interesting as well. And that is a kind of, that's the kind of, you've got the left hand, which is potentially writing career. Right hand is possibly I once thought about going into politics, but that's looking very unlikely now. But anyway, I'm able to do a bit of that with SEO, which is good. So yeah, I think that's a very good summarization of all the things that kind of lead us choosing us, as a profession, I guess.
I think also with politics, it's usually the people that are a little bit power hungry that want to get into politics, and the people that would actually do good things. They just don't want the like supposedly also, even if you start with good intentions, the power is gonna grab hold of you and then you end up not doing the good stuff anymore. So maybe it's a good thing that you didn't get into politics. But what you said, like company politics and stuff, it's so interesting when you hop from and one agency project to another, even if it's the same company but different teams, or if you work for different clients. Like it's so funny, like how it's always a bit of the same thing, and it's more psychology thing. It's more about there's this trick of, instead of showing people this is the one solution, to give them like one or two, maybe maximum three options, so that they feel like they had the choice. But then the problem with that is often that they go for the option that you just whacked out, so that there's an additional option to choose. And then actually it's not the best thing that would have worked for things like that. Was there like a specific company politics situation? I think it's often easier when you're the freelancer because you can detach a bit more. But was there something where you're like, get me out of here, or like something which was a big lesson for you?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, there's been a litany of lessons, I guess, across the kind of course of my career in terms of, learning about that political side of things. I think, yeah, you've touched on something quite good there in terms of like being a freelancer and being quite detached from it. Although a lot of the kind of recent roles I'm in, I am positioned within a company that has to kind of, steer ships and kind of get people together and get people talking and so on. But that's another story. But I think it was when I made the jump from agency side to in-house, because, agency are also kind of detached from, I guess I had largely quite a number of quite junior mid-level roles on the agency side. So I wasn't that senior. So I wasn't kind of too in the weeds of the politics on the client side. But you're sort of given, like a project, a statement of work, line items to deliver, and that was kind of it, at least at that stage for my career. I was kind of just delivering work. I guess it was when I moved in-house into a more senior position where I was kind of, thrown into, like different departments and trying to understand like what makes people tick and how I would get buy-in and kind of do the things I want to do rather than just ticking off a list of SEO items or whatever it happened to be. So that was a real kind of light bulb moment for me, I think. And that made me a better thinker, in terms of, trying to prove the value of SEO and trying to get a sense of what actually worked for SEO, depending on the website, depending on the client. I think I had quite a difficult transition in my first or second in-house role where I'd come literally back from an agency and I kind of just saw it as a deliverables based role, which obviously that's incredibly naive. You're not going to kind of get too far with that. It's not just about ticking boxes. It's about actually kind of being quite strategic and quite, laser focused on what matters for that business. And that was definitely a mistake that I made, I think, once, and kind of, learned from that quite quickly, I think, in one of my previous in-house roles. And that's kind of very much informed like what I try and position myself now as a freelancer who does SEO. It's not just about like, I give you a tech audit, I give you content, keyword research. It's more about like, hey, what is actually valuable for your business? It's much more consulting type model that I try and run, kind of looking much more commercial KPIs and things like that. So that definitely kind of, was the moment, I think, that moving from agency to in-house and becoming a bit more senior and kind of talking to CMOs and talking to, directors and things like that, where, you had to kind of tweak your language, tweak the framing of what you were trying to deliver.
you always have to adapt, especially when you work a technical job, because technology advances so fast. What's your feeling now when it comes to AI? Because I
Mhm.
guess with SEO, there's also some sort of politics. I don't know if it's politics for the actual SEO task, but like you have to research to know what people are searching for. Do they type um, I once had bed bugs, and we found the company online. And he said the way he scores so well on SEO is because he knows that when people have bed bugs at home, they don't search for flag
Mhm.
fumigation or
Mhm.
whatever. They don't
Yeah.
search for this tab.
Yeah.
They search literally for like, what the fuck are these bed bugs doing in my? How do I get rid of the like? They swear, you know. So his SEO is specialized towards people swearing for bed bugs, and that's
That's
why it's
interesting.
doing so well. And I found this super, super interesting. But now when you search things on Google, you come up with like the first thing that shows is the Gemini summary.
Yes.
So I don't know if it actually comes with like the blog post, like you see the links to the actual blog post, so you
Mhm.
can dig deeper into it. How does this affect like the SEO? Like would people still go on the sites even if Google picks it and then the person reads it? Does this impact
Mm.
like yeah, how does this work? Like what's your take on this?
So there's a couple of things to go into there, I think, and there's a perception bias that is around this, which I can get to shortly. But in terms of how that's impacted SEO, we're still quite early in this. Obviously, we've got sort of a couple of years in, really 18 months if you're in Europe interested in these Gemini overviews, and it is totally dependent on the query, on the industry, on the search intent type. So you see it a lot more for kind of those informational long tail queries. So to kind of reference your friend's bed bug business there, that's a very kind of like, what the fuck do I do with bed bugs? That's just like a very long tail, like what, why, how. Those are the types of queries where you kind of more often not see those kind of AI overviews. For things like your money, your life, or kind of like governmental type things, or when there's like kind of a need for presenting the truth, whether it's over things like vaccines or things like that, or kind of health issues, you normally will see that government sites ranking still. Although not always, there are plenty of examples of kind of AI overviews being quite misleading and, kind of presenting all kinds of weird information. But I guess to answer the first part is, yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely going to be, and there already has been, a reduction in clicks off the back of this. I think we're moving very quickly to kind of a zero click, although kind of not a zero click, kind of a reduced click SEO landscape, where, you know, and this is interesting because, whenever I kind of take on a project, the assumption is, as the SEO consultant, that my job is to drive impressions, drive clicks to a website, drive visibility, and that's totally fine. But what we're getting more towards, and what I try and get more towards, is like, we want to drive value traffic. You want to kind of drive traffic that converts, that is the right demographic, not just for vanity's sake. And I think with these AI overviews, they are sometimes quite useful, and they probably do see a reduction in clicks, for a number of queries. And I think that is going to be quite a shock to some businesses who are going to see kind of, rankings, not rankings per se, but kind of traffic in their GA4 or Google Search Console overviews go down because of these AI overviews. I can speak anecdotally to a lot of people that have told me that, yeah, I don't tend to click through anymore. I just read the overview, and it's quite handy if it's just kind of like a quite top level query, or quite I guess quite a trivial query, for example, like, what's the capital of what country, or things like that. And I think that's just an evolutionary step in SEO. I think that, the people that are kind of really doing it properly and providing value to brands in terms of driving traffic, getting more users in, being part of that whole brand positioning, I think that's still going to be very strong. And I think the AI overview is just, yeah, it's just an evolution of kind of where we're going in terms of that kind of fewer clicks, but more value clicks, I hope. And I've also had some success with some clients in getting featured in those AI overviews. It's not too difficult, if you kind of know how to structure your content, and you know kind of how to, you know, write content that might answer some of those questions. There's plenty of keyword tools that can kind of give you insights on that. And if you get featured in those AI overviews, and that can be great for your visibility, it can be great for kind of clicks, because the sources are linked to, as you say. That's my kind of take on it there. I think that overall, we're going to see fewer clicks for a lot of brands, but hopefully there's a kind of question around kind of value of SEO moving forward, in terms of like, well, there's fewer clicks, but are we getting more kind of value traffic? And is that converting? Is that kind of the audience we want to drive to our site? The second point on it is perception. And this is the bit that could be a little bit more troubling, I think, because it really does depend on what the kind of overall digital industry perception on SEO is because of this. And this is, again, anecdotal, but I've spoken to like a number of people in industries adjacent to what I do. So whether it's creative or advertising or anything to do with digital online type stuff. And there's often a kind of like, oh, isn't SEO kind of useless now because of these AI overviews? Like there's, and that, if that kind of bleeds into the narrative of brands looking to de-invest in SEO because of this, and because it's more tricky and unreliable, and upspend on things like paid ads and social ads or whatever it happens to be, PPC, that's another question. And there's always going to be people that are going to be talking about how to optimize for AI overviews and things like that. But I think, I think that it's definitely an opportunity. I think that it's an evolution in search, and it just means that we have to be smarter. We have to be more precise about what we're doing, but we'll see how it goes.
Before it was like, just get on the first page of Google and you'll be fine. Is it more about getting on the first page of Google, or is it actually going to be beneficial if you're going to be part of that Gemini summary? Because yes, your link is going to be like, the reference is going to be there, but are people clicking more likely on that, or are they more likely to click still on the results of the first page? Like, what would be the ideal outcome for a company that hires you?
Yeah, I mean, the ideal outcome would be definitely kind of feature as many of those AI overviews as possible, because they take up so much real estate on search now, and you can expand them and you can get it to kind of give more information. You can have a conversation with it, and it will keep on, providing sources based on the kind of answers it generates. And that's the ideal location where you want to be as a brand. You want to be referenced in those. That being said, I mean, there's still value in obviously being in those traditional top 10 results, particularly for kind of more kind of mid-funnel, bottom of funnel type queries, which you do for now see fewer AI overviews for. There are some plans that Google has to roll out for kind of, a very much an AI e-commerce shopping environment, which could change things on that front. But I think that, beyond those kind of informational queries that AI overviews does tend to generate for, I think that, if you can get featured in that, whilst also maintaining that visibility across, those traditional rankings, or indeed other features like map packs or all people also ask type queries, that still holds a lot of value, I think.
What is map packs? I don't think I heard of that.
So that's more kind of like local SEO. So, if I'm
Mm.
searching for an entity, whether it's like a restaurant or a bar or, something near me, for example, like a service near me, or, a particular product near me, you'll see those kind of maps return in the search results. And that's where you get those listings of optimized shops, optimized business listings that are on Google Maps. I mean, that's still kind of hugely valuable as well. And that will sit alongside, or will still be featured in search results with those AI overviews as well. So there's still plenty of avenues to get clicks from.
Now that you say it, I remember that there was this like, I think it was a Thai restaurant or something, and
Mhm.
they literally called themselves Thai food near me so that they would
Yeah,
rank
yeah,
high on SEO. Yeah. How do
yeah.
you feel like, do you think that would be helpful? I mean, it's also a joke. It's kind of funny. But is this actually beneficial?
If you're calling yourself Thai restaurant near me, I mean, it's definitely a funny from a branding perspective. In fact, I think there's a restaurant in the town that I'm in that's calling itself, Indian restaurant in the town location in Margate. So that's literally on their kind of signage. I think they've obviously clocked onto that as well. Can it help? I mean, yeah, sure. I mean, like that, if you're looking at kind of volumes and search behavior around those kind of, product or restaurant type near me type queries, that's going to return quite strong search volume. Whether or not putting it exclusively in a title will work, I'm not too sure. You have to obviously optimize the rest of that environment. So you, as a business owner who runs a restaurant or a shop or a leisure center, whatever it happens to be, you have the ability to kind of populate that Google Business Profile environment with lots of things like services, FAQs, questions. Obviously, you have reviews there as well. You can put photos up. So there's more work to be done in terms of kind of optimizing for those types of terms, but it's not a bad start. I guess you're kind of restricted though if you're just calling your business Thai restaurant near me. It's
Yeah.
it's a novelty, but like
But also, I think a lot of companies have copied that. Like, I've seen Indian food near me, all these kind of things. Like, wherever I go, it pops up. So yes, it's kind of a joke, but I guess it might also work because people
mm,
would find it funny and just want to check
yeah.
it out. So this is probably how they find some of their clients. How do you find your clients? So you worked for Samsung, you worked for Papa John's. Do you get a lot of clients through your SEO? Because I assume those companies would just Google SEO, blah, blah, blah. And
Mm.
then hopefully you would pop up. Or what's your, like, where do you find your leads or your clients?
Yeah, so I mostly get my clients through referrals. So I've been quite fortunate in so far as when I left the agency environment where you're kind of surrounded by SEOs, brilliant SEOs who've gone on to do wonderful things. I went in-house for a number of years after that and found myself oftentimes in sort of 2 or 3 roles where I went freelance, being the sole SEO in the room or the sole SEO department who had maybe a team of, or I managed an agency, or I managed a few copywriters or content execs or publishers and things like that. So I guess people might have remembered me who were in those big companies that have gone on to do other things or have moved on or started their own businesses. People might have remembered me as the SEO guy. That's kind of been one source of kind of leads that have come in. Obviously, that's quite finite because you only know so many people from that particular era of your life. The subsequent leads have come in through LinkedIn. So I've had people find me on LinkedIn. A few times I've got a couple of retained clients that I've kind of kept on to this day that have just found me on LinkedIn, that searched SEO consultant, that have messaged me, and it's kind of gone from there. I don't do a huge amount of outbound marketing. I will post on LinkedIn sometimes. I will pop up at conferences. I'll do my best to network. I sometimes blog as well, but I don't really kind of ram it down people's throats too much. I probably could do a bit more of that to get myself out there a bit more, but I'm kind of relying on, just being, I guess, going back to the first question, like being reliable and being kind of, structured and someone who I guess does what they say they will do, I guess, in some way or other. And I've got a pretty strong record of kind of delivering results and kind of, you know, doing things for clients that they're happy with. So it's often referrals that serve me quite well.
And it's also usually the best way of getting clients because you don't have to do much sales. They're already convinced that they want to work with you. They just want to know budget, times, are you available?
Yeah.
And yeah, it's much easier. When it comes to SEO, I don't know how I did it. But when you type, I need to check if it's still the case. But if you type in freelance UX designer London, I'm somewhere on page 1. And
Great.
if you don't have London, like, I'm nowhere to be found. But somehow this specific keyword leads people to my website. I don't have a lot of traffic, but also I don't need that much traffic. And the only thing I remember doing for my SEO was I just put my website on an SEO checker, and it was something like add a sitemap, improve your titles, add a couple more words on these different pages. And I just added a blurb, which might have caused the London thing to happen because I was talking about working in London. But yeah, so like I think it is definitely helpful. I got a couple of leads and also in the end clients
Good.
who just reached out to me on through my website directly. But I still get the majority of projects through LinkedIn. What would you recommend to the average freelancer who has a website where they have their portfolio services, etc., on there? What do you recommend for them to do to rank higher on Google?
I would say pain points is a really good niche-based pain points in terms of work that you've delivered or problems you've solved for clients. So just to kind of go back to your point on the website. So I've got a website. It's very much just, it's quite bare bones. It's a landing page. It has a contact me. It's just purely for branding purposes. I don't get a lot of leads, or I don't get any leads, people searching SEO consultant in London, SEO consultant near me. And I don't think I'd want those types of leads anyway, because when I worked at agencies, we would get, the agencies that get those kind of, that position themselves quite well for those kind of quite broad terms, don't tend to get too high quality leads. The stuff that does get me work that I kind of can get my teeth into has been where I've written blogs on a very niche topic or one area of SEO, for example, that solves a particular pain point or answers a particular question. And if I'm kind of writing quite broad SEO guides or, how to use X tool, or, what is my opinion on this particular, element of SEO, this news of SEO, there's so much content out there already on agency blogs, on publications like Search Engine Land or Moz, whatever it happens to be. There's so much out there already that do it so well and rank well for it, and just kind of sweep up. So it's not really worth my time doing it on that front. I tend to just blog on quite kind of weird stuff. So one blog that got me a few leads in was issue I had a few years back with a client who got hacked. their website got hacked and injected with
Oof.
code. Wasn't my fault. Just want to put it out there. Wasn't my fault. And they got injected with a bunch of code that kind of spun up all these quite spammy landing pages, and their indexation, their ranking landscape was kind of in a bit of trouble. We cleaned it up quite quickly. There was no long-term damage, but off the back of that, I had quite an interesting case study, and it turns out that it was quite a common thing to happen for websites on WordPress that had kind of vulnerabilities security-wise. But I wrote a blog on that, and that's gotten a few leads off the back of that front. People who have had the same problem that have seen my walkthrough and have said, well, this happened to me. Your blog's really useful, but I need some help with this. There's always been the China stuff as well. So I don't try and pigeonhole myself too much these days with that, because it's quite difficult to do SEO in China these days. It's become a little more difficult to kind of verify yourself if you're not in China, for example. And I can get onto that perhaps later on. But that always comes in handy. That's always given me a kind of solid amount of leads, or kind of specialist type work for people that want perhaps some research done for China SEO, want some insights. I've got a few blogs on that as well. So yeah, I guess for anyone who's starting out or wants to kind of optimize the website to kind of drive lead for freelance gigs, don't focus on what your core kind of offering is, because that is quite a broad term. If you've got a niche, then that's great. Blog about that, talk about that. If you're answering particular pain points, or if you've got kind of case studies where you've solved a particular problem using a different method, or you've done XYZ in a manner which is different from what is out there already, then that could be a really useful way of kind of highlighting yourself out from the crowd.
So it's more about writing blog articles than doing some tweaks in the code of the page.
Yeah, I think so. I would never expect my website, which has been around for a while now. It's linked to from websites where I've done speaking before, or other podcasts, or I've had a few blogs that have been picked up and have been linked back to. I would never expect my website to rank for broad terms around my core offering. It's just kind of unrealistic. And to go back to that point, if I did rank for those terms, I wouldn't expect quality leads to come from them necessarily. I might be wrong on that front. I'm just talking from experience. When I was agency side, and we used to get leads all the time from people that were just searching for SEO in London or SEO, and it would just be kind of not the kind of stuff you'd want to do. So yeah, I very much would rely on kind of the kind of pain point stuff, the kind of very niche stuff that I'm kind of known for doing, I guess.
Now that you say it, if I compare the type of leads I get through my website and the ones I get through LinkedIn or referrals, usually the ones that I get through my website, they're very low budget. And it's also people that never worked with UX designers before, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But like their expectation of the outcome and like the financial investment, the time investment versus what the result is often like you have to do a bit more explanation. So I understand what you mean with the quality of leads. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
you have to.
you
have. Oh, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
No, continue.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, you really have to. The whole thing about qualifying leads as well. I mean, the ideal lead is something that comes from someone who has an understanding of what it is they want to do for SEO, or indeed for UX, and they have like a strategy in place, and they have backing internally, and they understand that that's something that needs to happen for their goals, whether it's a marketing manager or a CMO or an in-house consultant. So, and you're right, those leads often do come via referrals or via LinkedIn, whereas those kind of more broader website leads, you really have to kind of spend a bit of time qualifying them, I think, which isn't always desirable for being a freelancer.
One thing that I found quite interesting is that you put like the whole China SEO on your website as well. And I always think like when someone spent a lot of time abroad, it could be that it was just easy to get a teaching gig in China and I just wanted to go abroad, like you mentioned, like 2008. But was there like another reason for you to go to China?
Yeah, I mean, I hadn't, how old was I at the time? 21. So it was purely adventure. I hadn't traveled a huge amount before then, been around Europe, obviously, kind of classic British holidays, France, Spain, Germany, but hadn't really been outside the continent, hadn't been to exciting places. The thing, I guess the catalyst at the time was I had the town I grew up in. I had a few friends that went to university in different parts of the country in the UK, and we all came back at the same time. And again, this was 2008, so global financial crisis, and we were all kind of stuck in our hometowns, not knowing what to do. And there were three of us that did the same thing. Two of us went to China. One of them is still there. 15, well, almost 20 years later now, he's still out there. and the other one went to Japan, and he's still out there as well. I was
Nice.
I was the one that came back. So I guess we all kind of got together and were like, yeah, we're going to do this bank thing together. And we kind of formed a close. We were already really good friends, but we've kept in touch off the back of that. And my friend who's still in China to this day, he's in the south near Hong Kong on the border there. He's actually back in the UK now visiting his family, and it was nice to catch up with him. And we always kind of exchange very kind of niche, weird stories that we had at the time. But I guess that was the catalyst. But I've always had an interest in languages as well. So and obviously cultures from that particular region. And I wanted to really get good at language. I think I knew at the time that it was obviously it's a burgeoning. It's not really a burgeoning. It is probably now the world's superpower. If we look at external factors. So it's I guess it was a decision. I don't know if it was that calculated at the time. If we're talking about it for a 21-year-old, but I guess that has paid off in terms of like having that language skill to rely on. As I said, I don't pigeonhole myself too much as the China SEO guy because it's useful for work, but I try to kind of position myself more as a general consultant these days. But yeah, I guess it was kind of some weird forbearing of one day this will come in handy, and it has proven to help.
Do you want to still say something in Mandarin?
What do you want me to say?
Maybe you can describe SEO in 2 sentences.
SEO in 2 sentences. Okay, so 搜索引擎优化是比较难的一个行业. There we go. So I said there,
Huh.
the SEO industry. Trying to back translate that. So SEO, the SEO. Hang on a second. What did I just say? I said the SEO discipline is quite a difficult industry. There we go. Which I guess has some truth to it. Yeah.
How does SEO differ in China compared
Yeah.
to Europe? Because I guess like in the West, you would just want to work on like to show up on Google, whereas Google and other things that is commonly used in our part of the world is blocked in China. Like, would you still then have to do some sort of SEO working also on Google or other platforms
Mhm.
if they want to go abroad, or is it just like very contained within China?
It's pretty contained. It really does depend on the client. So I've got some global Western clients that have footprint in China. They're kind of luxury. I've worked with luxury brands or enterprise, let's say kind of hospitality brands that have products or locations in China. And the Chinese operations are trying to sell into actually weirdly trying to kind of get Western clients to kind of visit them. So that involves Google still. So let's say it's like a kind of luxury, I don't know, like a luxury shop or a luxury hotel in a city in China that is trying to get Western clients to kind of stay over and visit or spend money. So there's still a element of Google there. That's kind of reverse engineering it a little bit. But yes, for the most part, it is quite contained. Google is all but blocked in China. There is a iteration of Google Hong Kong that you can get on, but it's all but pretty useless. The kind of search engine market share is incredibly tiny. There is some VPN usage in China among the kind of, the kind of middle class young people that are kind of visiting the West or perhaps going to university or studying abroad or going on a holiday and spending money abroad. They will use VPNs to kind of bypass that, but you're talking about a kind of, I guess, a small percentile compared to what's really out there. So yes, it is mostly on Baidu, which is this different search engine altogether. It looks a bit like Google if you log onto it. Obviously, it's completely in Chinese. It does differ in its structure. It does kind of have a different way of ranking sites, and it prominently features a lot of its own products. For example, of course, Google does that as well, but it has a monopoly on China's version of Wikipedia, China's version of Reddit, China's version of Yahoo Answers, Quora. It owns all those spaces. So whatever you tend to search for, let's say long tail search query, like, where can I go in this city to do this? You'll inevitably get a return with all these kind of sub products of Baidu. So that can be quite a challenge, but you can optimize in these arenas as well. There's a whole host of differences in terms of how it kind of prioritizes sites. Obviously, if you're hosted in China, if you've got a business instance in China, that sets you up quite nicely. Chinese .cn domain is also preferable as well. You have to kind of apply to things like ICP licensing, which is this kind of like a registration you have to get to operate as an online business within China legally. So there's hoops to jump through there. But I guess in terms of like core algorithm, when we look at Google compared to Baidu, it's similar. It's your basics. It's kind of optimization of elements across HTML. It's good content. It's useful content. There are a few things that we can't do for it that we can for Google. As far as I know, it doesn't support things like hreflang, which is the tag that you use to kind of mark up if you're serving your content globally across different countries and different regions. To my knowledge, it still doesn't support that, because I guess why would it? Because it's purely for mainland China. So yeah, there are a few like core structural differences and kind of, I guess, bureaucratic differences. But in terms of actually a core search engine, how it functions, it's not too dissimilar from Google, I'd say.
It's so funny because they seem like to just copy paste whatever other people are doing, but they seem to do a really good job at that. Like,
They're
they
doing it
might
better
not
now.
invent things, but they're doing a really good job in taking what's there. It's like still like an artist, it's a bit like that. One thing that I find interesting as well is that you could probably totally milk that niche, but you said that you want to be more of a generalist. What's your take on niching?
I think definitely. I mean, I do have a number of niches. I mean, that the China thing is definitely one of them. I do a bit of ghostwriting as well. There's a few kind of things that I try to get towards in terms of like positioning myself as like an enterprise or e-commerce SEO consultant. So yeah, definitely would recommend niching if you can. I mean, like, I think most people can get to a decent standard of general SEO skills, which is to have that kind of 360 knowledge of content and technical SEO. So I'm not a kind of, by nature, I'm not a technical person. I was terrible at maths at school. I can't code, but I can do technical SEO. Obviously not to the skill or extent in terms of ingenuity to some others in the industry, but I can do it insofar as I've delivered successful projects like migrations. I can troubleshoot when there's something wrong in the back end or code or things like that. But I think most people can get to that space if they spend time, if they have, let's say 10 years in the industry, they can get to, and they're exposed to a variety of clients, different CMSs, product types, that you can get to that quite quickly, I think. The SEO community, although quite small and everyone doesn't know each other, is still kind of, there's still a lot of options out there. There's still a lot of people offering a similar thing. I'm sure it's the same for UX as well. You have kind of, sort of generalist type designers. And I would say I'm a generalist SEO consultant, but I try and position myself as someone who in recent years has done kind of more kind of enterprise consulting type thing. Trying to move somewhat away from that label of just SEO, but more of another kind of digital consultant that kind of, looks to kind of use SEO or use content or use other digital strategies to kind of move the needle on organic search or organic visibility, things like that. So yeah, niching is definitely a good way to kind of go forward if you can kind of find something that is really it really interests you or kind of, sets you apart from the rest, I'd say.
Cool.
There was one thing, and I listened to a few of your podcasts as well, of other freelancers, about like kind of scaling as well.
hmm
I guess I might throw this one back to you, actually. So have you ever kind of been in that position where you are, let's say, at capacity, and you kind of see work come in, your funnel is kind of warm, you've got leads coming in, but you're at capacity and you turn down work and you think, oh, maybe I could have got someone in to help or grown. And I'm wondering if that's something that you've ever kind of, how you've approached that, really.
Well, I did at some point have a subcontractor, but I kind of, it wasn't like a hidden subcontract. It wasn't like I took the job and I passed it on and then sent it back to the client and pretended to be the middleman. It was more a contractor, and she was absolutely great. It was a client that I worked with in the past, and they came back for something else. And I said, well, that's something a junior could do, but also they might need a little bit more guidance. And I would like to support, because especially in the UX industry, I don't know what it's like in SEO, but I think there are so many boot camps, so many like, become a UX designer, it makes you so much money. And then people do these courses and then they really, really struggle to get their first gig. But once you've got that second gig, you'll be doing really well. But people want seniors, not juniors. And yeah, so I asked them if they would be okay for me to, because I am actually busy, like I am booked, but I would have a couple hours here and there to overlook someone else's work. They would be able to have someone that they could eventually hire then in-house. I would train them up. I would basically get paid separately for mentoring, like for upskilling someone for them. And they were happy with that. So that was kind of like scaling. And I loved it because
Okay.
I've done so many design systems and things like that where there's just so many buttons you can design, so many, so it's nice to give someone guidance or a strategy, and also to help them. So not just like do X, Y, and Z, but also what would you do? Okay, how could you do this better? Or
Interesting. Yeah.
have you tried this? So I quite I love teaching. I love sharing knowledge, which is also one of the reasons why I love this podcast so much. But I don't know if I would, because some people are like, oh, you should move from freelancing to having your agency. But I don't know if I would want that. I don't like working with another freelancer. They tell me the rate, and it was her first role. So I was like, you shouldn't go below this rate. And she was like, I wouldn't even have asked for that rate. So I was like, okay, good, I'll give you that rate. But if it's someone's salary, you're responsible of paying someone's salary. And also you're kind of responsible that they have something to do. So if that client drops out, like she would also know that, it's not my responsibility to find another client for her, for the subcontractor. But yeah, it was a bit sad when the project ended because it meant also that I stopped working with her. But I don't know if I would want to have employees. And I do have
Yeah.
a co-living where I have employees. So it's like a very separate business. Like I have it's in Sri Lanka, so it's different
Oh,
culture,
nice.
and
Yeah.
it's so hard. Yeah, it's a bit crazy. But it's very different to deal with just a client. And it's another story to deal with employees. And also being responsible on like, oh, this is what your time is worth. Like, it feels so icky to me to say,
Yeah.
because like
Yeah.
time is
Yeah.
invaluable. So yeah, there it's hopefully it's scalable, but like how do you scale a hotel with like, yeah, that's a different thing. But I guess that's the closest I've been to scaling. But I'm trying
Okay.
to get
Yeah.
a way of making things passive, which is a bit tricky. But yeah, what about you? What's your view on this?
Yeah. I mean, that's all really interesting. I've never, I've kind of been presented with this conundrum a couple of times where like, I could easily outsource and I could easily kind of look to kind of, take on more work, and perhaps kind of scale and then be more profitable by hiring people and train them up and such. But I've also kind of like, I quite like doing the work. I quite like getting down in the weeds. I quite like doing both the getting access to a CMS and playing around with code and playing around with elements whilst also being the kind of top level strategist as well. So I've always found it a little bit difficult to kind of, spend the time with someone and train them up and so on. I guess that's kind of why I wanted to go solo in the first place, was to
Mm,
kind of own everything that I do. But you're right, that is, it is a bit of a restriction sometimes, and I often think, well, I could have done that. I could have taken on that bit of work and,
mm,
but there's also part of me that's like, oh, he's really busy, so he must be good, so he's saying no all the time. So maybe we'll come back to him, So, but
mm.
that's definitely not the case. 'Cause people often need people quite immediately on a freelance basis. So
There.
yeah, it's definitely food for thought. Yeah, cool. I mean, I was in Sri Lanka in January actually. I went there for a sort of holiday over Christmas. It was lovely.
Nice. Where did you go?
Yeah. We went to, we arrived in Colombo, of course, then went to like the south, kind of a place called Hiratakia, sort of a beach in the south.
Kirikatia. That's the place where the co-living is.
Yes, it felt like it was very digital nomady, it was a bit like Bali, a bit like Ubud. Um,
Well, they hate to be called Bali, but I mean, the first time I was there was last year, January, and it's skyrocketed. Like the amount of people that
mm,
are going, and it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. But yeah, there are a lot of nomads going there, which I find
mhm.
interesting because Sri Lanka still has a lot of power cuts.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the place where we opened the co-living. So
Wow. Nice. Yeah. No, I definitely got that vibe from it. I was, oh, it's a bit like,
what made you choose? What made you choose Hirikatia?
well, we were looking for somewhere warm to go over Christmas. So it's we try and do this every year, whereby my wife's birthday is on the 2nd of January. So she's always like, I don't want to be in the UK because it's like the day that everyone goes back to work. It's after Christmas, everyone's kind of eaten too much, drunk too much, and everyone's in a bad mood. So we've had this tradition of kind of trying to be somewhere warm, either just after Christmas or over the Christmas period over the past sort of 7 or 8 years or so. And we looked at India, but I've not been to India before. She had, and Kerala was on the list, but it just felt a little bit too kind of, well, where do we start kind of thing. Whereas Sri Lanka, we had a few friends that had visited kind of in the past year or so that were like, you have to go. Here's our itinerary, and it made it a bit easier to make the decision. And it's a bit more manageable because it's a much smaller place. It's big, and we didn't see a huge amount of it in comparison to what we did see, but it felt like we were able to kind of get a good combination of like beach holiday, jungle, culture, food across those 2 weeks. It was great, you know.
It's so funny because I find it so interesting that there are so many nice places, but most people I talk to about Sri Lanka, Hirikatia pops up. And
Mm.
I don't know what happened because it didn't used to be that big on the map. Like everyone would go to Ahangama, Veligama, and now
Yeah.
it's always Hirikatia. So, which is good, but also I've seen how it's scaled, so much about
Oh my
scaling.
god, it was like a
Yeah,
construction site. It was like
yes.
it was it reminded me of not just Bali, but like also another kind of digital nomad place like Tulum in Mexico. Don't know if you've been there, but
Mm,
like
no.
it's another place where I guess people go and they work kind of remotely in co-working spaces, but just constant construction going on, and it was a bit like that in here.
Yeah, it's a bit crazy at the moment. But hopefully, the problem I have with it's just not built for the amount of people that are there, the amount of waste that is happening right now. People are still worried about using the filtered water, even though it's like completely fine. They prefer buying
Yeah.
bottled water, things like that. And it just, yeah. So, but it's something there is not that much we can do, but like people are talking, like people are like trying to make sure that there's waste management because like unlike in Europe where it's so like it's just normal like common knowledge or like expectation and that shows the privilege. Like if you buy a house, if you move anywhere, you pay council tax,
Yeah.
your rubbish is taken care of. Whereas in
Hmm.
Sri Lanka, people have to take care of their own rubbish.
Hmm.
That's why they
Hmm.
burn everything in the
Burn it,
garden
yeah,
because or they
yeah.
dig it in the ground. Yeah, it's like when we opened the hotel, I was like, so what are we gonna do with the rubbish? Is nobody gonna come pick it up? And they were like,
Hmm. Hmm.
no. I'm like,
No, so
okay, and
yes,
talk
it's
to the
not.
council and yeah, it's
Yeah,
just yeah,
yeah.
nice. So we can wrap it up. So you said you listened to
Great.
a couple of the other episodes, so you know what's coming. So yeah, there are 3 questions that I like to ask all of my guests, and one of them is, would you ever go back to a permanent job?
Oh God. I do occasionally entertain the idea by looking at what's out there on the market. I don't think so. I've kind of got to a position now where I've got a decent business. There's always that kind of, I guess you might concur with this. You never quite get rid of that slight underlying hum of anxiety of, like whether or not things are going to work
Mm.
out. But I've kind of been okay. I've been in this for 5 years now, and it's been going well. And I feel like I'm not really even leveraging it to the point where I could take it further. We talk about outsourcing. There's other specialisms which I could explore. I could do other things alongside SEO. I could employ the writing stuff as well. I do a bit of ghostwriting for people as well. So I don't see that happening. It would very much have to be like the perfect, very cliche, like the kind of perfect job in terms of like dream client. It would probably be a move into in-house again. I think I'm probably more suited to that now that I've been more exposed to businesses and understand what makes them tick. So I think I'd be more suited to that rather than the agency side. But yeah, I mean, I would never say never, but at the moment, I don't see
But then you would also have to go back to company politics.
it. That's true. That's true. Yeah, yeah.
Cool. The second question is, if you could go back in time, so you said you've done this for like 5 years now. So if you could go
Mhm.
back in time to when you took the leap to go full-time freelance, what would you today tell your past self?
I would say get a financial advisor, or work out. Yeah, like kind of understand, and I guess this is not just kind of related to freelance, but I think it would be like kind of skill set I wish I knew I had when I was, I don't know, like even in secondary school. We don't teach this stuff in the UK. You kind of have to kind of go out and learn it. So things about like taxation, rules around what you can and can't do as a business, how you can pay yourself efficiently, what you can do with pensions, all that kind of stuff. I'm still going through the motions on that and learning that 5 years later. As I said, I'm not a mathematically minded person, but this is such essential common knowledge that I think everyone needs to know, especially when you're running a business. And I'm still learning things. I've got an accountant. I've always had an accountant who does things for me on that front, but it's more kind of like having that knowledge from you know, a financial advisor or having that knowledge myself, I think, which I'm still kind of trying to work through and trying to, be smarter with the money, be smarter with paying myself and things like that. Um, Aside from that, in terms of the work kind of stuff, there's not a huge amount I would do differently. I would say maybe I'd do a bit more on putting myself out there. I've done a few speaking gigs over the years. I've done a few podcast things like this. I write a bit, but I've tried to block out kind of half days in my calendar or blocks in my calendar where I dedicate that to self-promotion or marketing myself, whether it's either like a post on LinkedIn or working on a niche site. Going back to the structured part of me. And it's never quite worked because I tend to get sucked into the client work that I'm doing. So maybe being a bit more strict on that front, like maybe 10-20% of my time doing more kind of marketing myself or working on myself as a business, which I haven't quite been able to do since I've gone solo. But yeah, maybe a bit more of that as well.
Yeah, I think that's the part many people forget. It's not just what you're doing, but all the things around it. You still need to do your taxes, you need to do marketing, you need to do, like, an SEO is part of this, but there are so many hats. But yeah, the finance stuff, there were a few things like you, where it's like, why does nobody teach you that? And yeah, I learned a lot of things. Read a lot of blogs and books and stuff. And then I was like, okay, I think I figured it out. And I did actually, I made a freelance finance course. And part of me is like, who is this woman, telling people what to do with their money? But then at the same time, it's like, no, it's just what I wish I would have known when I started.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah. And the final question, if you think of yourself 5 years from now, who knows, maybe you go back to China, maybe you went deeper into one of your niches. Maybe you do more music or more ghostwriting. Maybe you found a way to scale your business. What do you think your future self 5 years from now would tell you today?
Wow. Okay, there's a whole host of possibilities on that. I think the future 5-year Owen would probably say the same thing to the past 5-year Owen and the 5-year cycles that go on from there. Don't worry too much. It'll be fine. I think that's probably the overarching mantra that there's that saying by Mark Twain, isn't there? I wish I had it on my gravestone. I spent a lot of time worrying about things that never happened. I'm not really kind of an anxious person, but I think that there's always like that kind of blocker in my head about, oh, I shouldn't do that because it's not, it's like the writing stuff, for example, it's not kind of viable at the moment in terms of like funding my lifestyle, whereas the SEO stuff is nice. It allows me to do what I want to do, live a nice, comfortable life, and within my means, I aspire to do. So yeah, let's say that I've moved forward 5 years time. I've written I don't know, like a travel blog or whatever it happens to be. Just go for it, I guess. Don't worry, just do it. And that, I guess, goes back to the previous question where it's like, I wish I had a bit more telling myself at the beginning of my career that blocker in the calendar where I'm spending a bit of time on myself, doing things for myself, and that is probably one of those elements, and that needs to manifest itself at some point. So I have a litany of ideas for books, for novels, for short stories, whatever it happens to be, but it's just about time. And if I force myself to do it, then who knows where it might go.
I mean, that's the thing. It's always like we don't have enough time. We don't have enough time to take on another gig. We don't have enough time to do the things we actually want or to. I mean, there is a part of where you need to hustle to be able to do the things you want to do. But there are also things that we could start doing now to then, like, even if you just write an outline of that book, even if you research people where they might be able to help you publish it, it's just like one small step. And if you just every day, or like not every day, once a week, set 1 or 2 hours aside to just work on your goal, you will get there earlier than when it's just like a one-day thing. But yeah, it's just go for it. Like, do what your future
Absolutely.
self says. Just go
do
for
it.
it.
Just do it. Just do
Yeah.
it. I think now that I've done this for 5 years, and there's often that thing. It's like, what would happen if all my clients just stopped tomorrow, and like I would be fine for a period of time in terms of being able to exist and pay myself, and that might be the impetus that one needs to kind of go ahead and do those things. But yeah, there's always I guess there's always a reason not to do something, isn't there? And it's
Yeah.
often time. It's often time.
It's often time, but it's often our mindset. And because we don't trust that it's going to work out. And if we would actually believe, hey, it's going to work out, and like what your future self already said, just do it, then yeah, I think it's often ourselves that's in our own way.
yes, a philosophical note to end on, I think,
Yeah, like perfect ending. Well, thank you so much again for your time. This was super, super nice.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much for having me. And may I ask, whereabouts are you based?
I am at the
Yeah.
moment in Thailand.
Oh,
I don't have a
lovely.
base though. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Oh, you're in Thailand. Okay. Whereabouts in Thailand
yeah.
are you?
In Chiang Mai.
Very good. I'm looking to
Yeah,
maybe base myself out there for a couple of months in a year or so. So we'll see. I
I
have been
highly
there before. It's
recommend
lovely.
it.
Yeah, it's lovely.
If you need any tips, I can send you a ton.
Oh, amazing. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Cool. Thank you. This was such an interesting conversation. I really hope you got a lot out of it. I definitely did. And one main takeaway that I would want you to take away with you is that SEO is not the only source of creating leads. You can find leads on LinkedIn or word of mouth, which I think is like one of the best sources to find good quality leads. But having a good SEO definitely doesn't hurt. If you like this episode, please leave a review and hit the follow button. Supposedly this can help with SEO and help more freelancers to find us.